Good afternoon to you. 306 Now News Talk, 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up today, Adam Kredo will be with us from the Washington Free Beacon. We'll talk about these horrific terror attacks on Israel over the weekend. Adam Kredo will give us the latest on that subject. David Harsanyi is here at 4 o'clock from The Federalist. We'll get into the details of how the Biden administration has made all of this chaos possible. They've just accelerated it along. And Julio Rosas is here at 5 o'clock, a man who was on the ground yesterday as there were people celebrating the death, dismemberment, torture, and kidnapping of Israelis this weekend. They were celebrating in New York. Julio Rosas was on hand to see it, and he'll share what that was like right here in the United States. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, addressing his country just moments ago. Here's a translation provided by CNN's Hadass Gold.
That they will win this war to bring light to our people.
He's
now quoting the Bible.
גם הפעם נעמוד בהבטחה, כי עם ישראל חי.
It says the people of Israel will live.
The people of Israel will live. I've seen some quotes coming out of this, and we'll try and get you some more as things develop here. But again, he just spoke moments ago that Israel's reaction to this will be remembered for generations. He said today. And boy, I got to say, you look at the numbers here, and they're only getting worse as you look at what happened over the weekend. It was early Saturday morning that Hamas began an assault coming out of the Gaza Strip onto Israel of thousands. They say some 5,000 rockets at daybreak Saturday fly into Israel, devastating target after target after target. Additionally, then you had humans, troops, terrorists, flowing across the border, burrowing through and flying over in makeshift hang gliders, flying into Israel and raping, murdering, and kidnapping Israelis of all kinds. These aren't just military-aged males who were subjected to this type of violence. It was everybody. It was women. It was children. We heard reports if you were moving, you would be killed. We heard reports of Israeli women covering themselves in the blood of the dead, lying still, trying to wait out the Hamas militants, the terrorists, as they roamed the area looking for survivors. And they took a lot of people hostage, too. They did. Hamas at this moment is claiming that they have some 130 hostages, at least, that they've taken into custody. And we know, of course, that does include many women, children, grandmothers, one Holocaust survivor at least, who was among them. Taken into the Gaza Strip. And why are they being taken into the Gaza Strip? Well, to be held as human shields, for one, to try and prevent the Israelis from launching defensive strikes for fear that the Israelis will kill some of their own people, being held hostage there. And now the late-breaking news that we've got in the last hour or so is that Hamas is threatening to execute hostage after hostage for every Israeli strike into the Gaza Strip. And not only do they want to conduct executions, they want to televise them. They want to put them on camera, like ISIS used to. Remember this? Remember the ISIS executions that got around the world? People being horrifically executed in demented, creative ways. And that was what ISIS tried to do. It did. And now Hamas saying that they will be executing these civilian hostages on live television for every airstrike that hits in Gaza. Listen, this is a translation of the Hamas spokesman, a guy who is called Abu Obaida, a short while ago.
To put an end to this, from this moment on, we announce that any targeting of innocent civilians without warning will be met, regretfully to say, by executing one of the hostages in our custody. And we will be forced to broadcast this execution.
Now, they say any Israeli strikes that hit civilians, that's what they're claiming. This is a Hamas tactic. It has been for as long as they've been trying to destroy Israel. They will run their military bases of operations out of civilian targets, hospitals, schools, where civilians are, intentionally to use them as human shields to prevent the Israelis from being able to strike them without creating a propaganda exercise in the process. They are willing to have their own people killed. Their own people killed in order to use that as some sort of propaganda win. Look at the Israelis killing civilians. No, the Israelis are defending themselves, trying to strike these terrorists, and these terrorists are holding civilians close to them in the hopes that the civilians die and that they can turn the global community against Israel. That's the goal. That's what they're up to. In fact, Israel in just the last 24 hours has issued urgent warnings to the civilians in the Gaza Strip that they need to relocate. You need to get out of the area because if you don't, you very well could get hit by Israeli strikes that are going to come in a justified action of defense. After we now see that there have been over 900 Israelis who were murdered. That's that we know of so far. Over 900 Israelis were murdered this weekend by the Hamas terrorists. And I should point out and emphasize that almost all of them were civilians. Well over 800 of the Israelis who were killed were not members of the IDF. They were not military members. They were civilians. They were people who were hanging out at concerts or just going to and from their homes or recognizing the holy days. They were killed, murdered in cold blood, executed in their homes, dragged from their homes, imprisoned by the terrorists of Hamas. That's what actually happened. And so now the Israelis are warning civilians in the Gaza Strip, like I said, get out of the way. For your own good, get out of the way because we've got strikes coming. What is Hamas saying in reaction to that? They're telling the people there in Gaza, ignore those warnings. They are lies. Ignore them. And so they're willing to kill even more civilians now, just so they have the opportunity, in their view, in their demented view, to blame these Israelis. It is wild. The developments here are very fast-moving. I should point out 9 Americans at least are dead. 9 Americans are dead that we know of so far. An unknown number of Americans are missing. We don't know how many were taken hostage by Hamas. Israel, let's see, is being asked. So Reuters has a headline right now. A Hamas official says the group is open to discussions over a truce with Israel. You got to be kidding me. So they go in there, they kill 900 people, almost all of them civilians, rape, kidnap. You can't emphasize these things enough because this is how horrific it is. And now a senior Hamas official said the group is open to discussions over a possible truce with Israel, having, quote, achieved its targets. Musa Abu Marzouk telling Al Jazeera in a phone interview, Hamas is open to, quote, something of that sort in all political dialogues when asked whether the Islamist group is willing to discuss a possible ceasefire. I have a feeling a lot more Hamas members are going to die. I think that's probably what's going to happen. That is certainly Israel's appetite here, and you can understand why. Meanwhile, here in the United States, Joe Biden has ducked out of work today before lunch. As of 11:52 this morning, the White House announced that a lid has been called for the day. It's a press term indicating that there will be no further public events from the President of the United States. He's done today, 11:52 a.m. What is he doing? He has talked for, what is the number? Something like 3 minutes this weekend was the length of time he gave to this entire issue publicly. And now he's disappeared. They've decided to put him in hiding. No answers from him. The White House is telling reporters today that, he's actually super busy working on the Israel thing. Reagan Reese, White House correspondent at the Daily Caller, tweets the following. White House spokeswoman tells me that Biden is, quote, working on supporting Israel all day when asked why that lid was called before noon today. Lids, the spokesperson added, concern only public events. I'll believe it. Never. That Biden's working all day? Sure. Biden has, of course, steadily screwed up this entire region for the duration of his presidency. Remember, Joe Biden hasn't been president that long. I mean, it's been long enough for all of us, but in just under 3 years, Biden has really screwed up this region of the world, not to mention a lot of other regions of the world. Let me go back in time in a number of ways. If you go back to 2021, there was a Fox headline, State Department admits possibility Palestinian aid will fund Hamas arsenal. You got that? U.S. aid to the Palestinians funding Hamas's weapons. A senior State Department official acknowledged Monday that the Biden administration could not guarantee that humanitarian aid meant to support Palestinian refugees in the Gaza Strip would not be used to restock Hamas's military stockpiles. The official made the admission during a call ahead of Secretary of State Antony Blinken's upcoming trip to the Middle East. Blinken is expected to push Israel, Hamas, and other regional powers to ensure that a recently brokered ceasefire remains in place. How'd that go? Quote, we're going to be working in partnership with the United Nations and the Palestinian Authority to kind of channel aid there in a manner that does its best to go to the people of Gaza, the official said. I'm also sure that the government of Egypt will have some role in that. As we've seen in life, as we know in life, there are no guarantees, the official added, but we're going to do everything we can to ensure that this assistance reaches the people who need it the most. Really? So, so we dump a whole bunch of money in there, and where did it go? What was it used for? Well, it looks like now it's being used to kill Israelis. So there you go. The United States providing Hamas with an arsenal, and not just in the form of money. Additionally, have you followed this development today? You know, remember when we left Afghanistan? Do you remember what we left behind in Afghanistan? The number of those weapons? $7 billion at least in weapons were left in Afghanistan. What happened to those weapons? All the stuff we left behind, what happened there? Well, let me just take you back for a moment before I tell you what's happening now. U.S. arms left in Afghanistan are turning up in a different conflict. NBC reported that this year in January. The conflict they were referring to was in India. Weapons left behind by U.S. forces during the withdrawal from Afghanistan are surfacing in another conflict, further arming militants in the disputed South Asian region of Kashmir, in what experts say could just be the start of the weapons' global journey. That's right, all of our weapons are traveling around the globe. Authorities in Indian-controlled Kashmir tell NBC News that militants trying to annex the region for Pakistan are carrying M4s, M16s, and other U.S.-made arms and ammunition that have rarely been seen in the 30-year conflict. A major reason, they say, is a regional flood of U.S.-funded weapons that fell into the hands of the Taliban when U.S.-led NATO forces withdrew from Afghanistan in 2021. They say they've been recovering the weapons from Pakistan-based militant groups that the United States has designated as, terrorist organizations. Of course, you know that the Taliban have an extensive, intimate relationship with Pakistan. So, the arms end up there. And now we have additional reports on where those arms have ended up. And yes, it is believed that they ended up in the hands of Hamas. The weapons we left in Afghanistan may very well now be being used to execute women and children on the streets of Israel. Middle East Monitor with the following report. Israel, U.S. arms left in Afghanistan reach Gaza. U.S. arms left in Afghanistan have been smuggled to the Palestinian factions in the Gaza Strip, the Sama news agency reported Friday. The local Palestinian news agency disclosed that Newsweek reported an unnamed senior Israeli military official confirming, quote, some of the small weapons seized in Afghanistan had been spotted in the hands of Palestinian factions in the Gaza Strip. So this is Biden. This has Biden written all over it. What else has Biden done? Well, Biden has given, of course, unbelievable amounts of money to Iran. They just coughed up $6 billion in cash to Iran. The Biden administration spent the weekend saying, oh, no, they haven't even spent the money yet. Oh, it's only going to be for food and medicine. $6 billion. Now, let me try this logic on a lefty for a second. If I told a lefty, hey, the Biden administration just gave the NRA $100 million, but it's only for administrative costs. It's just to, stock the food at the cafeteria. $10 million. Biden just gave the NRA $10 million. You think a lefty would be, oh, okay, well, if it's just for food in the cafeteria, that's totally fun. It's garbage. You understand it. Literally, I mean, we can use the word fungible, but the point is you're dumping endless amounts of cash into this terror state, which now is proudly taking credit for what went down this weekend in Israel. We have a Wall Street Journal report. We'll get to this in just a moment, but it's talking about the Legion of Doom was brought together over these past few months to plot out the very attacks we're seeing take place in Israel today. And the country that brought them together, well, the United States is trying to normalize relationships with, and we're like giving them untold, endless sums of money. And that's all Biden. Tehran helped plot the attack. The Wall Street Journal reported this weekend Iranian security officials helped plan Hamas's Saturday surprise attack on Israel and gave the green light for the assault at a meeting in Beirut last Monday. According to senior members of Hamas and Hezbollah, that would be Sunni and Shia, respectively, brought together by Iran to attack Israel. They're all coordinating together. Iran, of course, gives these groups tremendous amounts of money. Biden gives Iran tremendous amounts of money. Let me take Jim in Illinois on line one. Jim, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Vince, the Hamas has to be eliminated. And it's not that the Israeli intelligence doesn't know who they are, or American intelligence don't know who the main targets are. Is that we have a feckless commander-in-chief in the name of Joe Biden, and the people that are pulling his strings. He's just a meat puppet for Obama. Okay, so when you come down to it, Obama's minlings or whatever they are need to recognize that the blood of these Israelis is on their hand. Okay, they need to be eliminated. Okay, and this commander-in-chief, so-called, will not do it.
Yeah, it's this story. There's a lot more to unpack here, Jim, in the ways that Biden has sold the Israelis out. Everything from funding their attackers, which he did, to having Iranian infiltrators in the United States in his administration. Some reporting on this these past few weeks. We've covered it extensively on this program, but boy, it adds a lot of context to what we're seeing play out right now. We'll discuss that in some detail coming up. Adam Kredo is moments away. David Harsanyi joins us at the top of the hour. Stay with us here on WMAL. Good afternoon to you. It's 3:36 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news, and there's a lot to get to today. David Harsanyi will help us at 4 o'clock. He's from The Federalist. We'll get into the Biden administration in all of the ways in which Joe Biden is responsible for accelerating the conditions that led to Hamas's terror attack on Israel this weekend. And then Julio Rosas will be with us at 5 o'clock from Town Hall. He was in attendance as a bunch of people went out, took to the streets of New York City to celebrate the terror attack. It's all too crazy. We'll cover it all. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Speaking of crazy, just moments ago, John Kirby, a spokesman for the White House, was on the Fox News channel, and he indicated that the administration is aware that there are American citizens being held hostage now by Hamas, but we don't know how many, and that the U.S. government is in contact with the Israeli government to try and establish the details there. But wait a second. Hamas, which is funded by Iran, supported by Iran, didn't John Kirby just say that by giving billions of dollars to the Iranians, it wouldn't lead to more Americans being taken hostage? Here he was last month.
I know that you dispute that this is a ransom payment. Obviously, many critics of this agreement say that it is just that. So in effect, they suggest it's $1 billion per American individual being released. So how is this not incentivizing bad actors and rogue regimes like Iran in the future to detain more Americans?
Bad actors like Iran and like Mr. Putin in Russia don't need any incentive to continue to look for ways to wrongfully detain Americans. It's been happening a long, long time, and we have to accept the reality that it could happen again in the future.
Well, the future has arrived. It certainly has. Let me bring in Adam Kredo now. He's a senior writer of foreign policy and national security for the Washington Free Beacon and joins us now. Adam, good afternoon to you, sir.
Howdy, how are you?
I'm okay, but we're watching all these headlines, Adam, and I would really appreciate your help trying to contextualize this for us because
Sure.
we've seen if any American around the world, we've constantly seen stories of the conflict in the Middle East, the Arab-Israeli conflict, that there's more missiles coming across the border, more attacks. Contextualize this attack on Israel this weekend for us. How different is this?
It's significantly different. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the headlines like I have following this, that, this is really the worst attack in at least 50 years, certainly decades and decades. And it's not just a new operational sophistication. It also shows the long arm of Iran, which, while it has long been present in funding and directing Hamas, this shows an operational coordination that is kind of unprecedented and also obviously threatens to open up a second front on Israel's northern border with Lebanon, where Hezbollah is in complete control of the government and also funded and directed by the Iranian regime.
Isn't that second front kind of already open, though? I mean, the Hezbollah is firing missiles over the last 24 hours into Israel now, apparently in support of Hamas's efforts. And I was just pointing out moments ago, these are different Islamic sects. You have the Sunnis in the form of Hamas and the Shia in the form of Hezbollah working, according to the Wall Street Journal, at the direction of the Iranians on some sort of unified attack on Israel now.
Correct, because the differences in the sects are always surmounted by their hatred for Jews and Israel, so that's no surprise there. And you're right that there has been some chaos on the northern border, but there's certainly fears of a wider war in that Hezbollah tries to send troops over, tries to, like Hamas, also start a ground war with Israel on a second front. And I think the Israelis are very conscious of that. It's also kind of important to note with Iran here, the context of this. Iran also maintains relations with Al-Qaeda. Again, religiously different sects, always assumed by, the analysts and experts to be at odds, but really they're not. Al-Qaeda's top leadership is in Iran, being supported and hosted by them. You have Iranian-controlled militias, part of the government in Iraq, and also the Taliban in Afghanistan expressing support for what Hamas is doing. This is all a unification of these groups to lay siege to the Jewish state.
Tell me about the role that these Israeli hostages play right now. Hamas is claiming that they have over 130 Israelis in the Gaza Strip at the moment. That is absolutely the kind of thing that complicates the military response for Israel. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it does absolutely, especially with the Israeli government's longstanding policy of not leaving hostages in terrorist hands. I'm sure will remember when just one soldier was captured, Israel, made a siege to get him back. Now with hundreds, and not just soldiers, but also civilians, I think that's going to play into the calculus of what Israel decides to do, how it chooses to wage this war, and whether it really, like Netanyahu said, goes ahead and launches a full blitz of the Gaza Strip, or is conscious that these hostages are being kept within there, and hopefully their intelligence services can determine where and coordinate an attack that doesn't also endanger them.
Yes.
I mean, it also bears noting, I think that Hamas is very famous for its use of human shields. Now, that's not just hostages they've abducted, but of course that's playing into the situation now. But their constant use of their own citizens and civilians in highly density areas, highly populated areas, using them as cannon fodder for the Israelis and implanting weapons stores and rocket launchers where regular people live.
Adam, I was just citing a series of events over the last 24 hours. The Israelis have been issuing urgent warnings to civilians in the Gaza Strip that they need to relocate. They need to get out of the area because defensive attacks coming from Israel are going to start flying in, have been. The Hamas and the leadership there in the Gaza Strip has been telling the civilians, ignore the Israeli warnings. That goes right to your point.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And it also highlights something that I think is missed on a lot of Americans who are not geographically familiar with the region, just how close everything is. This is a really, really small piece of the region that we're dealing with here in terms of Israel, the size of the state itself, and also its borders with the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and Lebanon up in the north, that the threat of spillover is something constantly on people's minds, that there are settlements, there are kibbutzim, there are other places in Israel that are really right up against hostile zones in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
And there's threat not just of attacks from Hamas hitting them, which we saw when they launched this surprise assault, but also spillover from whatever Israel chooses to do when it responds.
You know, Adam, we're going to be talking about this more coming up throughout the show with David Harsanyi and Julio Rosas. But, you know, I over time, and on any issue, when I hear it be described in black and white terms, I always pause. I'm like, give me more information. I want to know about the two sides of this conflict. But in reality, with Israelis and what's going on with Hamas, you know, the idea that people can get on television and be like, you know, which they are. This is happening on American TV right now. There are people speaking up on behalf of Hamas and saying, oh, they only attacked military targets, or they only took military people hostage. And I'm saying this is obviously a lie. I'm seeing on my camera screen, my phone or computer screen, I'm seeing images of grandmothers being taken hostage, of children. Like, what are they talking about? I mean, to me, it's almost like this issue is hard to be any clearer than it is. And yet there's a lot of people who seem to be misled about the details here. Why?
Yeah, the misinformation is happening on multiple fronts, and I can address them for you. On one, you have the pro-Palestinian sympathizers, the people who will say this war is only a response to so-called Israeli occupation, so-called Israeli aggression. But that's not the case. The facts are that Hamas specifically went after citizens, children, women, the elderly, and slaughtered them or took them hostage. It was not focused in any way on just targeting the Israeli military or its positions, although they did also do that. But this is attacked to cause chaos. You see the term militant group bandied about rather than terrorist group. In fact, there are publications that mandate the use militant of the word militant instead of terror group because they think that has an implication. The media is complicit in the spin because of that, in the way that they choose to use their language. This is a terror group that tries to kill women and children, not a militant group that is taking on an oppressive army. That's the first thing. The spin is also happening on the ends of the political players in this. By that I mean the Biden administration saying the $6 billion ransom payment for Iran played absolutely no role in bolstering Hamas and helping Iran organize this attack with Hamas. The White House is also claiming that its resumption on day one of aid for the Palestinian government, including areas controlled by Hamas, that has no impact on this because U.S. aid did not go to Hamas. In fact, that's also a lie. 2 months ago, I published internal State Department documents where they expressed a very real and concrete fear that U.S. assistance would indirectly benefit Hamas. That was written into these emails when they asked for sanctions waivers so they could restart this funding. So the spin and the media war against Israel and against the Biden administration's role in fostering this is really playing out on a bunch of different levels.
So we fund the Iranians, we fund Hamas, we have depleted our own. There's ammunition in the region that has actually gone away to go to the Ukraine conflict. The United States was taking ammunition that was dedicated to protect Israel and sending it to Ukraine, so that went down. And now we also have reports that weapons from Afghanistan, left behind by the Biden administration to the tune of some $7.1 billion at least, are now apparently in the hands of Hamas being used against Israeli civilians.
Right, of course, not surprising at all. The Taliban has already said that they support Hamas's actions, and two, what did we really expect the Taliban would do with the billions of dollars worth of equipment? They weren't going to donate it to, what we would see as a good cause. They're not sending it to Ukraine. Naturally, they're sending it to all of their terrorist allies. So I think, again, these are all pieces of a puzzle in terms of the Biden administration's diplomatic efforts with Iran and its foreign policy priorities in the Middle East. All of this is coming to bear in kind of the culmination with Hamas's attack.
Yes.
Its support from all of these places that we helped terror groups resurge in, and our diplomacy with Tehran that enabled them to get a hold of quite a bit of money.
What does this mean for Israel internally? I know there's been a lot of, over time, there certainly has been a lot of political factions warring with each other in conventional terms, not like, actually at war, but in political terms, just going after each other. Will this have the effect of unifying the Israeli people, and how firm is their resolve? Where do they take this next in response?
I mean, historically, in the short term, there will be unity. Israel is no stranger to these kinds of attacks, even though this one is certainly the worst in recent memory, if not longer. But in the short term, you will see unity. The Israelis are known to come together despite their, political warring and all of the disagreement in the country in times of war. They've demonstrated that repeatedly over the years, and I don't expect anything different. One thing that I think will be new is the piece of the intelligence failure here, not just on their side, but also with their allies, that is the U.S. Why did we not see this coming? Why did our intelligence services, their intelligence services, really not seem to expect this brewing? In fact, thinking that the region was, kind of in a state of peace. I think that's something in the long term you're going to see the Israeli government really grappling with.
Yeah, a lot more questions left to be answered, and unfortunately, a lot more chaos ahead, it seems. Adam Kredo, thank you very much for your assessment today, as always. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
That's Adam Kredo at the excellent Washington Free Beacon. Hang tight with us because David Harsanyi is just moments away. We're going to talk more about the Biden administration's handling and failures here. I have a clarifying piece of audio for you. This is, I said moments ago that John Kirby had indicated that Americans are being held hostage. A correction on my part. He said it is likely that they're being held hostage. He's seen the reports on the subject. Here he is speaking to Martha McCallum on Fox.
So we know that there are 9 Americans who lost their lives in this Hamas attack in Israel. And we also understand that there are currently Americans being held hostage, correct? How many Americans are being held hostage at this hour, John?
The truth is we don't know, Martha. I mean, certainly we've seen those reports, but we're not able to independently verify that Americans are indeed among the hostages. Now, look, we have to accept the very grim possibility and the likelihood that there are Americans being held hostage. We're in constant touch with Israeli officials right now to try to get a sense of the whereabouts of all the unaccounted for Americans, because they who knows where they are or what condition they're in. We want to make sure we get more detail.
That hostage taking funded by the very nation that you just gave $6 billion to, in order to get American hostages released. What message did they get from that? What message did they get from that? We'll take more. We'll take more. They're funding the hostage taking by Hamas now. Let's see here. Let's take Kevin in Manassas, line 3. Kevin, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. I think we really have seen the beginning shots of World War III take place this weekend. Rightfully so, Israel will retaliate hard. They're already predicting they're going to have no mercy, which they should not have. They need to eradicate these troglodytes from the face of the earth. And I would not be surprised if we see a preemptive nuclear attack into Iran to take out their nuclear capabilities, at which time I predict the rest of the world, the United States and the Biden administration included, will turn against Israel, and it will fulfill biblical prophecy, and the Armageddon war steps to Armageddon will be taking place. There is no doubt in my mind that the JV team is in charge of our foreign policy, and I call on America, as the Bible says, these are the last days, repent, because that's all we have left. It's time to repent America needs to turn away from our immorality and our sin, and we need to get right with God, or unfortunately, we are in for some bad times.
Yeah, it's time to turn to prayer, as always. Kevin, thank you. It is very scary. You do worry about what comes next here. I saw some reporting this morning that the Biden administration is now looking to link up any prospective aid package to Israel to Ukraine. Wait, what? What do you mean you're linking it to Ukraine? So deaths in Israel mean we need to send another package to Ukraine? How ghoulish can you get? We'll talk about the Biden administration's response here moments from now. David Harsanyi has got the details on that. Stay with us.